What's up, lore masters? So before we start breaking down religion today, I was surprised to find a cutscene that is on the Blu-ray version of TNG in regards to Who Watches the Watchers. Now, for those who don't remember, Who Watches the Watchers, the episode, involves cultural contamination of a society by the Federation, where Picard is asked to act like a god in order to save one of his own people. During his discussions on how to save one of the scientists, he is asked to beam down and pretend to be a deity. What was cut is an internal monologue that they just decided to not go with. Now, I can't show the entire scene, unfortunately, but have gotten permission by CBS to show this one part, his inner turmoil. Now again, to set the scene, he was just asked by a scientist to play a god, and we're going to go from there, and this will be his entire inner monologue.
It's crazy!
What's up, lore masters? Special shout out to the YouTube channel Say Goodnight Kevin, who makes some excellent breakdown videos on the Christian film genre. That's where I actually got that clip from. And I'm giving him a shout out even though I took the clip and I'm using it under fair use, and I really didn't even tell him that I'd be using it. He probably doesn't know or will ever know, but it's a good show and you guys should check him out. Links in the description below. Today we'll be taking a look at religion in Trek, specifically within Starfleet. Now, I must admit, while researching about religion and Starfleet's views on it, I found myself reading several different posts by fans, looking at what Memory Alpha has to say on religion, and ultimately a thesis by ex Estris Scientia. While I don't agree with all of the conclusions from Scientia, I'm going to link his article below. It's well worth your time to read. I'll also admit to some bias when I first began this research. I already had a base outline of what I thought the breakdown was going to be. That is to say that it was my opinion that we saw religion in the original series, and then any good faith for religion, any good explanations of religion would be completely lost in the next generation. Then faith would be given a bit more of a fair look in Deep Space Nine, and ultimately it would move back into myth and mysticism and a degradation of Indian beliefs in Voyager. After that, we would go back to the next generation mentality of hating religion in Enterprise and Discovery. Interestingly, there is a convincing argument that, even in the original series, we see traces of anti-religious sentiment. In fact, given the trials and tribulations that the crew of the Enterprise go through in the original series, it's no surprise that religion is all but wiped out, at least for Terrans when we take a look at it in the future. But let's do this chronologically, at least in-universe chronologically. In Star Trek Enterprise, I found no real standing on how faith is treated within the United Earth. Though, given what we see in the original series, I can only assume that the Abrahamic religions existed in one form or another. The one point I will say here is that we see two different sides of the NX-01 Enterprise crew. The first is that of almost a reverence for the beliefs of others. In fact, I might say an understanding or even kinship when you consider the interactions of the crew with the priests of Pajim and other sacred sites. The only counter to this that people will give is in the episode Chosen Realm. This is where Archer is highly critical of the religion and faith. For my money, I think this was a reaction to people utilizing faith that ended up in one of his crewmen being dead, the Enterprise being damaged, and hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people dead on the planet when they get there. I could see many religious people acting in a similar way that he did when presented with what he was presented with. I mean, it was an emotional reaction to what was going on, not necessarily one of a hate of faith or religion. Though, as mentioned before, a common theme that Starfleet and those within Starfleet contend with is that of a false religion and how it ultimately ends in death. This would be no different for the Enterprise series. In Star Trek Discovery, I didn't really find any relevant references or necessities of God. Again, like we see in Enterprise, the religious are generally the villains who are causing a catastrophic amount of damage and pain. When you consider the Klingon Empire, ultimately the entire civilization falls in line under a religious cult that decimates Starfleet and the Federation. Ultimately, their warships stopping on Earth's doorstep. Though, Discovery does present an interesting theory. And before I get into that theory, let me just put a caveat here, okay? And I have to do this, I'm sorry, I just have to. If you're religious, especially ultra-Christian, you're going to probably get upset about what I'm going to say further. Let me just say this, stop. Okay, stop. Hear me out completely before you start commenting. And it in fact aligns directly with Abrahamic and biblical teaching. So if you're getting angry at me, you also got to get angry at the Bible. Also, because apparently I have a high contingent of Mormons who watch my show, I'll be honest, while I find it interesting that statistically Mormons may be wealthier than other denominations, one anomaly within an entire dataset does not disprove said dataset. Also, if you're not of the Abrahamic faiths and this doesn't apply to your religion, that's great. I honestly can't speak to that. Okay, so now that that cryptic caveat that makes no sense is out of the way, let's get back to it. As I was saying, Discovery presents an interesting theory that, while I don't think they did it on purpose, is intriguing, to say the least. In what looks to be consistent for the Federation and Starfleet, or at a minimum humanity, the need and use of religion is all but gone when there is no conflict. We barely see any references to God in Enterprise and Discovery. These eras just don't have it, and I don't think we see any religious iconography or celebrations at all for Terrans or Starfleet either, and if we do, it's limited. The need for God, as far as I can tell, is gone. And then the Federation goes to war with a religious cult of extremists known as the Klingon Empire. Starfleet is decimated, and it looks like the end of the United Federation of Planets, though due to plot convenience, the Federation ultimately wins the war. And then we move into the era of the original series. And in the original series, we see a resurgence of faith, at least to some degree. Now, when you look at real human history, we see this actual formula happening over and over again. The lower income of a society and the more destitute said society is, especially if it's been through a war, the more likely they are to believe in a god. And then, as a society and culture begins to grow, the need for a god, or gods, vanishes and the society becomes highly secular. We can honestly see this as a microcosm in the United States of America right now. Again, with the possible exception of Mormon outliers, apparently, if you break down individual states by wealth, and then put that against how religious said state is, states with lower incomes will be more religious than the wealthier states that are more secular. And so too, we see that in the genesis of Starfleet and the Federation. The Terrans, and most likely a majority of other species, are secular. Then the war happens with the utter destruction of everything the Federation had, and into the original series, we see the rise of religion. It's so prominent that even Constitution-class vessels have chapels. Kirk will often defend religion in episodes such as Who Mourns Adonis, and even Spock will quote scriptures, such as he does in the episode Gamesters of Triskelion. Now, atheists still exist, of course. I mean, Scotty is known to not believe in a higher power, but that just means there's a mix, an amalgamation. It would seem that, with Starfleet, people fell back to faith after everything was destroyed. However, as with the other series, the fighting of false religions and the devastation said false religions do upon populations would still occur. This isn't even referencing the false religion we see in The Final Frontier. I mean, throughout the original series, they're constantly fighting false gods. The difference in this era and others is that there would be callbacks to actual religions that existed, and there would be people that believed in these religions. And this leads us into the 24th century and the era of the Next Generation. It's at this point that all belief and faith is gone. And again, if we follow with the theory that during the good times and during an increase of wealth, there is a lack of belief in God, then this makes complete sense. During the Next Generation, Starfleet had tamed most of the Alpha Quadrant. The Romulans had retreated behind their borders, the Klingons had lost the Federation Cold War, hell, the Klingons were now the allies of Starfleet. I mean, the hubris of the Federation was so much, it was so high that they put children on their flagship, the one they sent to fight enemies of the Federation. And so, because of this, we see at this time that a majority of Starfleet would shed the need of a god or gods. Picard would personify Starfleet belief when he talks about how religion is something of the Dark Ages. Now again, this doesn't mean all races in the Federation would believe this. We have reason to believe that the Vulcans would keep some semblance of their religion. I also know people will point out that Worf is religious, which is fantastic, but Klingons aren't a part of Starfleet at this juncture, so, there's that. But it is very telling how everyone on the Enterprise goes along with Picard's, his bigotry. And we even see this at the highest ranks within the Admiralty. It isn't just Picard. It is obvious that Starfleet does not like or endorse religion. Though, I suppose I would be remiss if I didn't mention one anomaly. We do see some respect for religion from Picard. Ironically, it is when he is referring to people who personify Indian cultures and their faiths. Because God forbid you give reverence to the Abrahamic faiths. I mean, screw that. I mean, even if you pretended that Christianity or Judaism had any positives to it, your progressive audience would revolt and you'd lose your precious monies. I mean, am I right? And when we take a look at Deep Space Nine, which has Starfleet and the Federation as, well, what I would describe as becoming non-militant in their atheism, we see in the early series, hell, even into the mid-series, I'd say, that Starfleet is more tolerant of people who don't believe what they believe. It honestly reminds me of a saying, and I'm going to paraphrase this and butcher it, but the worst critic of alcoholism is a recent convert who has stopped drinking. In the original series, we've had some semblance of religion, and then when the Terrans and Starfleet shed religion, they were militant about the myth and mysticism that faith had. But then, leading into Deep Space Nine, where the Terrans, and again, most likely a lot of Starfleet, has become comfortable in their secularism and they don't feel the need to push the dogma. In fact, the conversion of Sisko from an atheist, where he talks about how he doesn't believe in gods, but he has ideals that he stands by in the episode The Ship, to becoming a devout follower of the prophets towards the end of the series, is very well done. It gives both positives and negatives of becoming religious. Sisko sacrifices the needs of his family. He turns his back on his son, chooses the prophets over Starfleet, and yet has faith. He gains strength in his faith. He believes in something bigger than he is. Ultimately, he becomes something more than the sum of what he was, simply by believing. And I'm not even talking about joining the prophets. I'm talking as a person, he grows. In fact, I would say that Deep Space Nine is the only series that presents a, shall we say, more balanced argument for both sides. Though, I think you're deluding yourself if you think that there isn't an anti-religious leaning even in this series. With Voyager, there really isn't much to say. I truly believe that they take the mysticism, the mysticalness, and the belief of Native Americans, and they just butcher that belief, and they make it look like something it's not. Honestly, I find most of the episodes by Voyager that looks at religion, especially with Native Americans, to be sacrilege and disrespectful. With one notable exception. If you would like what I think is one of the best examples of religion and faith versus science, and a look at how it's fairly done, then I want you to go and watch Sacred Grounds. It's a season 3 episode of Voyager, and it is probably one of the fairest views on religion versus science that I've seen. I don't give much praise when it comes to Voyager, so enjoy this while you can. Ultimately, I think it's quite obvious that most of the universe of Trek is either secular or leaning towards why you don't want to be religious. Starfleet, at least as portrayed by the Terrans, is at its worst anti-theist and at best agnostic. The preaching of tolerance and understanding stops at the doorstep of hard science. But those are my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below.